I mentioned earlier on in the tour, Edinburgh was a medieval walled city. Edinburgh actually had walls around 3 sides. On the 4th side it had a lake, and the lake was over in the north, and because they're not very imaginative when they name things, they called it the North Lake. Now in the old Scots language that became known as the Norloch. But what this meant was the city was enclosed on all 4 sides. So as the population started to grow, they couldn't expand the city outwards. So instead they began to expand the city upwards. And the buildings here ended up very, very tall. Now they're fairly tall today. These ones are taller than they look. You might notice they start further on down. We're on that very steep hill again. Back in the Middle Ages, buildings in Edinburgh could sometimes grow to be 14 or 15 stories high. They were kind of the skyscrapers of their time. Now the way they worked, the bottom floor usually would be a shop or stabling for animals. You'd then have rich people living just above that. People would then be getting poorer as you went up the building until you ended up with incredibly poor people right at the very top. Now, obviously today we have the rich people at the top in the penthouse suites. Back then, firstly, no lifts. So obviously the rich people didn't want to haul their way up all those stairs to get to the top. But more important, fires. Edinburgh had a lot of them. If you had a fire in your building, if you live at the bottom, you can get out. The further you go up the building, the more chance by the time you know there's a fire, it's going to be in the stairwell. So at that point, the only way out is out of the window. There were no ladders long enough to reach the very top floors, so the people up there would have ended up jumping. If they survived the fall, they'd probably wish they hadn't. Now, the other thing is that the rich people tended to live closest to the Royal Mile. Poor people lived down next to the Norloch. And again, you'd think that's the wrong way round. You'd think rich people would want to stay away from all the noise of the street, be down in the peace and quiet, have a lovely lake, have a view to the countryside. The reason they had it that way round? Sanitation. Back then we had no plumbing, we had no sewage system. If you needed to get rid of your waste from your house, that went out of the window as well. Now, before you threw your waste out of the window, there was a word you were supposed to shout. And the word was, Gardiloo! Now that actually comes from the French, garde de l'eau, or watch out for water. But it was not water. You had about a second to shout back, hold your hold, or you were going to get a very, very nasty shower. Now, the waste would fall into the street. Then the rain would come, the waste would wash off down the close. It would all end up in the Norloch. And it wasn't long before the Norloch was a great big lake of poo. Now, poo clearly smells bad. If you're living your life next to the Norloch, you're living in a perpetual stench of poo. Poo also produces methane gas. Methane gas has 2 main properties. Number 1, it is highly flammable. Number 2, it's a hallucinogenic. So if you're living next to the Norloch, you're living in a perpetual stench of poo, hallucinating, while explosions are going off around you. Now, at some point, the city authorities decided they didn't want people to have to dodge poo all day long. They passed a law called, believe it or not, the Nastiness Act. This law said that basically from now on, people would only throw their waste out before 7 o'clock in the morning or after 10:30 at night. Now, before 7 in the morning isn't a problem. You're on your way to market, you hear Gardiloo, you jump out of the way, you shout back, you're going to be fine either way. After 10:30 at night, you might have been drinking the whiskey. You're now a little bit the worse for wear as you're staggering down the close. And somebody shouts something at you in garbled French, and you go, huh? Now, during your life, there may have come a time when you have been incredibly drunk, and one of your friends has described you as being shitfaced. That is actually where that word comes from. Now, what we're now going to do, this is going to be the longest walk on this part of the tour, so try and stay close together if you can. We're going to head out through this corridor here. We then go across the road and